Russia has announced its intention to retaliate against South Korea, and diplomatic tensions between South Korea and Russia are rising. Today, let's take a closer look at this issue. Let's get right into it. Before we begin, I want to let you know that I've published a book this time. It's also my first merchandise. It's available at Kyobo Bookstore and nearby bookstores, so if you get a chance, please come take a look. I'd really appreciate it. Russia has stated it will retaliate against South Korea. Recently, South Korea has been considering participating in NATO's Pearl. To briefly explain, this Pearl is about providing indirect support to Ukraine. However, Russia has protested against this. According to a report by Telegraph Agency of the Soviet Union, Maria Zakharova, spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, said in response to reporters' questions that Russia has no choice but to exercise its right to retaliate against South Korea, including taking asymmetric measures. Spokesperson Zakharova also stated that she wants to once again emphasize that South Korea's participation in supplying materials, whether directly or indirectly, will only serve to prolong the prospects of the conflict. She also said such participation would irreparably damage Russia-South Korea relations and harm chances of restoring constructive dialogue on the Korean Peninsula. In particular, Russia stated that if South Korea becomes involved in the Ukraine war, it will only delay the end of the war. They also emphasized that it could have a negative impact on the relationship between the two countries. In the case of this program, when Ukraine presents a list of needed equipment, NATO member countries and partner countries provide the payment to the United States, and then the United States delivers the equipment to Ukraine. The South Korean government has not yet decided whether to participate, but it is known that even if they do, they are considering providing support limited to non-lethal equipment. It is known that the South Korean government's consideration of participating in this program is not only about strengthening ties with NATO, but also includes the strategic consideration of expanding defense industry cooperation. By participating in the program, they can build trust with NATO member countries and also have more opportunities to export and sell weapons to allied countries. That is why they are currently reviewing participation in the program. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs said our government is continually discussing support for Ukraine with NATO. The government has continued offering humanitarian aid and non-lethal military supplies to Ukraine while keeping its policy against providing lethal weapons. The coalition is continuing to expand its influence. Currently, more than 75% of the 32 NATO member countries are participating, and NATO has revealed that 75% of the Patriot missiles and 90% of other air defense missiles provided to Ukraine have been supplied through the coalition. The scale of support is also gradually increasing. Among non-NATO member countries, Australia and New Zealand are currently participating, and recently, Japan is expected to officially announce its participation as well. Now, as Korea is also showing signs of joining, Russia is strongly protesting. Depending on Japan's participation, Korea's diplomatic and security landscape could shift greatly. If Korea joins and indirectly supports Ukraine, its political trust with NATO could significantly grow. In other words, in the European defense industry market, what's important is not only performance, but also confidence in shared values. If Korea clearly sends the message that it is willing to share common security burdens, major European countries could recognize Korea as a strategic partner much more quickly. In fact, one of the reasons Korea lost out to Sweden in Poland's new submarine project, worth 8 trillion won, is said to be the perception that Korea's stance on supporting Ukraine was ambiguous. Poland is a NATO frontline country and is directly affected by the war in Ukraine. From the perspective of such a country, it is only natural to prefer suppliers who have a clear commitment to security solidarity. Currently, Korea is also competing with Germany in Canada's submarine project, which is worth 60 trillion won. Canada is also a NATO member and is actively supporting Ukraine. In this situation, if Korea participates in Poland, it will build political trust and assets. This could go beyond simple arms deals and expand into long-term military cooperation, technology transfer, and joint development of weapons. Additionally, higher defense exports could boost related industries like steel, electronics, shipbuilding, and semiconductors. As the new Cold War structure becomes prolonged and security blocs are being strengthened, if Korea secures a solid position within the Western Bloc, it is likely that there will be gradual expansion of opportunities across various industries. However, it is also difficult to ignore the potential negative repercussions in the opposite direction. Although we're still reviewing and haven't confirmed participation, Russia is already issuing strong warnings. Russia has so far defined the provision of lethal weapons to Ukraine as a clear red line in its relationship with Korea. Although the current government is reportedly considering only indirect support limited to non-lethal equipment, how Moscow will interpret this is another matter. Russia views any support for Ukraine's military, like funding or equipment, as a hostile act. As the war continues, Russia is increasingly clear about which countries it considers friendly or unfriendly. In this context, if Korea participates in FELL, it may not just end with diplomatic rhetoric, but could actually lead to concrete countermeasures. The most concerning scenario is the acceleration of military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. Both sides are expanding military technology cooperation, and if Russia deepens involvement in North Korea's missile and satellite development, the Korean Peninsula's security situation could grow more complex. It's also hard to rule out Russia using pressure tactics in energy, resources, and economic cooperation. With these intertwined variables, South Korea faces a tough choice between building diplomatic trust and managing security risks, making it necessary to closely examine the asymmetric measures Russia mentioned. The main thing that comes to mind is stronger signals in diplomacy and security. Russia may openly criticize South Korea on the international stage, or continue to make statements that weaken South Korea's position regarding issues on the Korean Peninsula. At the same time, there is also the possibility that Russia will more openly reveal its cooperation with North Korea in terms of military exchanges, applying psychological pressure. Russia is a country with a lot of experience in manipulating public opinion in many countries around the world, and there is a good chance that it could use hybrid warfare to attack South Korea as well. There is a high possibility that information warfare aimed at dividing public opinion on the internet will be carried out. If this happens, South Korea is likely to face significant pressure both domestically and internationally. However, there is certainly another perspective as well. Checklist. Identify main points. Remove repetition. Use concise phrasing. Retain key details and proper nouns. Ensure correct grammar. Russia is now giving North Korea extensive support, raising their relationship from limited cooperation to a military alliance. Beyond exchanging shells and conventional weapons, there are ongoing signs of strategic military technology transfers. As Russian help with military reconnaissance and satellites becomes possible, the information surveillance structure over the Korean Peninsula may be changing. In August 2025, the Korean Central News Agency reported that on the 24th North Korea conducted live-fire tests of two newly developed types of surface-to-air missiles. While details haven't been revealed, the performance is considered improved in many areas over the existing KN-06 system. Speculation suggests improvements in detection range, interception altitude, and response speed, raising questions about possible Russian technical support. Meanwhile, a senior official from the Ukrainian government revealed that Russia's advanced air defense system, the Pantsir S-1, has been transferred to North Korea. The Pantsir S-1 is considered a system capable of both short-range air defense and close-in protection. If it has actually been deployed, it is highly likely that North Korea's air defense network has become even more robust. This could burden South Korea's Air Force precision strikes and intelligence operations during a contingency. As these circumstances accumulate, Russia is already creating significant variables in South Korea's security environment through North Korea, and there are growing voices questioning whether only South Korea should remain cautious. With the international order shifting toward blocs, debate is growing over whether unilateral restraint is still an effective strategy. There, Russia even held a pro-war rally in South Korea, almost as if to mock South Korea, and protesters marched carrying Russian flags. It is known that a rally similar to the one held last year is also being planned for February 24. Because of this situation, South Korea is currently facing a major dilemma. Should we also consider the possibility that the war might last longer than expected? Currently, Ukraine's support system seems like a temporary wartime platform, but if the war lasts another year or two, these measures could become a permanent military procurement network. Several member countries are already participating, and since much of the air defense missiles and key ammunition come through this channel, it shows the system is quickly becoming institutionalized. If this happens, participation will shift from supporting Ukraine to how deeply one is involved in the Western military supply system. Connecting cost sharing, standardization, specifications, equipment certification, and information sharing systems directly drives integration into the military-industrial ecosystem. Countries that participate early can secure a voice in the supply chain and decision-making structure, but those that try to join later are likely to be given only limited roles within an already established framework. Even more important is building trust. Countries that share wartime burdens are more likely to be prioritized in post-war reconstruction and joint development. Conversely, countries that stayed distant early on may face higher diplomatic costs before being seen as strategic partners. The longer the war drags on, Poland becomes not just a temporary option, but a part of the bloc structure, and whether or not to participate changes from a short-term diplomatic card to a decision that will determine the landscape of Korea's defense industry and diplomacy 5 or 10 years down the road. Since today's decisions can determine our future position, this issue requires us to consider not only the choice itself, but also the speed and timing.